Treatable. Really, it's treatable. Yes, it's treatable. It's the Treatable podcast. Say what's on your mind. It's the Treatable podcast. Real, coming, treatable. It's the Treatable podcast. It's on the Treatable podcast.
So you've heard of the 5 love languages, right? We've got words of affirmation, gifts, quality time, etc., etc. But do you know your attachment style? And no, they are not the same thing. Attachment theory proposes that there are different styles of how we attach to others based upon how we grew up and our relationships with our primary caregivers. And this affects how we create new relationships as an adult and how we behave in those relationships. And if you deal with kids on a daily basis, whether you're a teacher or a parent or some other kind of caregiver, understanding the different attachment styles can help you approach these relationships with much more compassion and curiosity. Welcome to Treatable, the podcast where we unpack mental health topics with experts who show us that change is possible. Today, we are taking a look at the 4 attachment styles and asking how they can help us understand ourselves and support the kids in our lives.
Treatable podcast. It's on the Treatable podcast.
And I couldn't think of a better guest to have to be able to talk about this than Marcus Aurelius Higgs. So Marcus works with Certain Future, which supports parents and preteens, so that 10 to 14-year-old range, so that they can show up and maintain a meaningful relationship with their child during these natural identity breaking years. So the parents he works with, they know the value of doing hard things and want to be present with their son or their daughter before it's too late to bridge that gap. But I promise, even if you don't have kids, if you know anybody who's a teenager or who's a preteen, or if you're wondering if all of your needs were met when it comes to being a kid from your parent, this is the show for you. This is the episode for you. So without further ado, thank you so much, Marcus, for joining us on the podcast today.
Clint, it is wonderful to be here. Thank you for sharing your platform, and I look forward to this conversation.
So Marcus, walk me through, when did you come to understand attachment styles, and how is it like a part of your work that's like a helpful way of working with both teens and with parents?
My background is communication. I studied journalism, and what influences my work a lot is the international feel of it, and I'll explain what that means. My mom's from the Philippines. My father's from the Bahamas. I was born in America, but right after I got my degree, I went and I taught in South Korea. From South Korea, I went to Saudi Arabia, then I went to Spain, spent some time in Thailand. I was in the classroom as a high school English language arts teacher, and in all these different settings, I was noticing human development. And I'm curious. I'm curious about how people grow and develop. And speaking about attachment styles, there's some intersections or there's some through lines that you see in all aspects of people. And now I serve as a communication coach for parents of preteens. Attachment style is a big part of that, where you're seeing how they developed and how the child felt safe, seen, secure, and soothed during those developmental years. And you see patterns of then how they show up in the world afterwards when they're forming their own identity. I would say the person who put me onto this most would be Dr. Dan Siegel. Love his work. That's a little bit about where I'm coming from in this conversation. Yeah.
So let's unpack these. So for folks who are trying to understand attachment styles, maybe it's a buzzword. It sounds like a quiz that you might take on BuzzFeed or something. You're like, what's your attachment style? But it's actually a lot more complicated than that. And it plays out in the way that we interact with the world. So can you walk us through the different attachment styles and how that might impact us as a grown adult? And let's start with the first one. What is a secure attachment?
Sure. A secure attachment, these are people who, as the name says, feel secure. They feel comfortable being intimate or close with people. I like to think of this as it's maternal energy, nurturing energy. And as I mentioned before, to be safe, to be seen, to be secure, and to be soothed. Those are the 4 S's, as they're said. Life is about managing stress. When you're dependent on somebody, It's, can this other person help you manage that stress? And that's how you do it. You give a look into their mind. You see what's inside them. Dan Siegel calls it mind sight, but you're able to go into the person's mind and understand their subjective experience of life, help them be soothed, help them be seen in conversations, making sure that they're safe and secure. And that is how you get a secure attachment.
An interesting thing when we think about secure attachment, some people might think, oh, this makes clingy children. But secure attachment is really about allowing kids the space to feel safe, to explore, and to actually be self reliant. So, somebody without a secure attachment is not going to feel comfortable with trying new things. Someone without a secure attachment is not going to feel as comfortable about learning a new skill or a new language or failing because they do not have the confidence that somebody is backing them. So, real practical example, a baby cries, the mother immediately comes and soothes them, picks up the baby, puts the baby next to her heart, feels her breath, feels her heartbeat. They're both calm, and learns through mirror neurons of seeing their caretaker's face that I am in a safe place. And if I am in trouble and I cry, then this parent comes and soothes me. Now, those types of things, those types of stresses, to your point that all life is about managing stress, they really change in complexity as they get older, but the premise stays the same. I am in need of something, and I need to know if I need my parental figure that they have my back, right? I need to know that they're actually thinking about me.
Yeah, beautifully, beautifully put. Thank you. Yeah. Now, here's where the nuance, not nuance, but the tricky part comes dealing with preteens and starting adolescence. We're moving them towards autonomy. So there's an approach of parenting called autonomy supportive parenting. If you have a secure attachment, let me say it like this first. The difference between being needy and having needs, we all have needs. Being needy is thinking, I can't meet these needs without this person. A person with a secure attachment can venture out there to understand I can meet my needs. Because when they start to shift into that preteen stage or adolescent stage, you're not so much the manager of them, you're the guide on the side. And it's making that shift as in to say, look, you're still seen safe, secure, and soothed and all that. You need to do it independently. And a person with a secure attachment knows they can come back to source, but they can also go out there and risk, take healthy risks, let's say. Okay. And
Absolutely.
that's where the shift sort of happens later on in life, as you were saying.
Yeah, we think about, as a former educator myself, I also taught language arts. So I'm right there with you. I was in the classroom with seventh grade language arts for a number of years in the old Fourth Ward of Atlanta. Shout out to Kendesi Middle School. But one of the things that we do in pedagogy or the art of teaching is like a really simple practice called gradual release. It's I do, we do, you do. And if you step back, it's actually just modeled after parenting. First, I do this for you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of all of your needs. Then we're going to take care of your needs together. So at first, I'm breastfeeding you. I am feeding you with a spoon. Then we are learning how to prepare a meal together. You're able to hold your own spoon. You're able to put it into your mouth and you're able to like chew and swallow. And I don't have to burp you and all of these things. And then you be able to create a meal for yourself. You create a meal for the family, right? That's one specific example, but all of teaching and really all about child development is that process. And think about it like the boredom principle. Maybe you've done something in art and you got really good at drawing a circle, and then you started putting circles together, and then you started playing with different shapes. And it's that when you feel safe and comfortable with one thing, you're able to then move on to something that is more complex. But all growth has to have the predecessor of safety. And if you don't feel safe, then it doesn't matter. So that safety point of view, it is super important. Secure attachment, it's how we actually make kids self-reliant. Anything else you want to add when it comes to secure attachment?
When the person learns to know that they are secure in this world, there's a, let's say, force outside of them that is secure. They start to realize they then are also a force and there's security in here, because actually some people see learning as a threat. And that's why there's the avoidance or apprehension and not the venturing out into it. And this could be a segue, but when they know they're secure, that's when you can venture out to learn. So that's what we need, or else they'll avoid it.
This episode of Treatable is brought to you by Sandstone Care, which helps teens, young adults, and their families overcome challenges with mental health, substance use, and addiction. They provide age-specific, individualized treatment plans centered around your unique situation and goals, and they only use evidence-based therapies to help you get there. They keep their group therapy sizes small so folks can connect with others going through the same struggle and so that you never feel alone. They also give academic and vocational support to help you improve your grades or to get started on your career path. And lastly, because they know that mental health and substance use affect the people closest to us, they provide support for the whole family through their family therapy program. To learn more about teen and young adult treatment options, go to sandstonecare.com. Change is possible, and Sandstone Care is here to help. Yeah. And I think self-regulation is kind of within this thing. We only learn how to manage our emotions through the primary caretakers in our life. And our ability to manage our emotions successfully really depends on how somebody showed us at some point how to manage them. It's not something that's typically taught in schools. You actually need to be able to have a human being in your life to say, okay, let's take a deep breath. Let's think about our feelings. How are you feeling? Why are you feeling that way? What can we do to be able to express ourselves more clearly? That's something that has to happen between human beings. And we first have to see it being modeled. We have to see a caretaker in stress. We have to see a caretaker with adversity or difficulty and to see them positively and securely manage that. And that's the only way that we are able to learn how to do that ourselves. So the most important thing about being able to be a human in relationships is kind of regulating your emotions and to have positive coping mechanisms to, as you said, manage stress. And you get that through a secure attachment style. And you can only get that through a secure attachment style.
In the work I do, when I came out the classroom, took the note from Mr. Rogers that said, if you want to help the kids, you support the parents. And the thing is, I work with the parents. It is transformation coaching or personal development, but I'm using the thing that's most relevant to the parent, which is the kid. And the thing is, I'm helping them be a trustworthy present parent. I'm helping them to be regulated because kids are going to be dysregulated. That's what kids is. That's the growing process. And it's how do you keep your stuff together? Not necessarily the S word I use, but how do you keep your stuff together when all else around you is falling or breaking, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. If we didn't learn that as a kid, we don't have the tools, and that doesn't mean that we can't learn it now. Let's talk about the second attachment style, which is anxious, preoccupied attachment or anxious attachment.
These are people who they're anxious to form intimacy or closeness because they're fearful of being abandoned. So there is no trustworthiness there. And because they've been burnt a time or two, if the past is any indication of the future, they're thinking like, yeah, I'm not safe in a sense. So they're always on heightened alert. You know, when we were talking about dealing with stress in life, what stress is, you learn how to tense when you know that there's going to be an impact. There are three types of stress. The stress just to maintain, the impact that comes out of the blue, and the third one is for your expansion when you're trying to grow. If you don't know when a stressor is going to come, you don't know when to tense up. So oftentimes you find anxious people, they're always on constant high alert, or they have that 20-yard stare and they become numb to it. So they lose sensation of it. That's what happens when, again, a person is living in an unregulated environment or experiencing unregulated stress. This is one way in which they've learned how to cope. Cope means to hit back. This is one way they learned how to deal with it.
I like the way you phrase that. Cope means to hit back because we all cope in our different ways. And when you think about all of these attachment styles, another way you can think about them as coping mechanisms or ways to survive. So anxious attachment is when somebody is not always there. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not there. And so we learn to perform to be able to get the love that we need. We learn how to read people's faces. These are often the people pleasers. These are often the people who are really dismissive of their own feelings and will push it down. And they're more likely to be the doormat in a relationship. They're more likely to be in a toxic relationship with somebody because they're uncomfortable expressing their boundaries for a fear that if they say the wrong thing, that this person will leave them. Oftentimes, this is also the fear of if these people really knew me, if they knew the real me, then they wouldn't love me. And that's a real feeling, right? And people who have anxious attachment because, mom and dad were working or they were around sometimes and they weren't around, or their caretakers were in manic or depressive states. And so you see this flip flop in how they were talking to their kids. They're going to have that anxious attachment because they're not exactly sure when the next fulfillment of their needs is going to be met. Anything else you'd say about anxious attachment?
Well, as we go through the next two that we're going to go through, anxious attachment, disorganized, and avoidant, the word I want us to keep in mind is regularity. And that's why I say be a trustworthy present parent, because these actually come about by not being regular. And on the back end, we could talk about what being regular means, because also that means rules or patterns and schedules and things. So yeah, I just want to plant that seed now so that as we go through these next few, the audience can keep that in mind.
Yeah, like can I rely on my parent to have my back? Can I trust them? It makes sense. All right, let's go to number 3, which is avoidant attachment. What is avoidant attachment?
They avoid, or they're uncomfortable with emotional intimacy and closeness. So they just keep a distance. They avoid. It's also called dismissive attachment. So they're trying to be aloof, let's say. You don't have to be responsible for other people if you don't buy in. And my approach to living, which is positive psychology and also stoicism, but we say other people matter. In aloof or avoidant, you're just like, well, other people don't matter.
Yeah, if you want to create a narcissist, somebody who has an everyone against me or me versus the world mentality, then you want to give them an avoidant attachment style, meaning that they've learned that I have to be strong by myself. I cannot rely on other people. Other people let me down. When I've relied on other people, they have not shown up for me. And so the best way to be able to secure my feelings is to lean on my own efforts and successes. A lot of times people with avoidant attachment styles are extremely successful in their professional career and they struggle within relationships. They have thriving jobs and they have money. And at the same time, they feel emotionally distant from the people who are closest to them, often their family, often their partners, and then also in turn to their kids. And so it's something that when we think about this self-reliance type of thing, if you're saying, I don't want to deal with your feelings, it's like, don't cry. It's like, don't show me any of this. You need to learn how to be strong by yourself. That is a recipe for an avoidant attachment style.
You know, one thing that I put in my pocket a long time ago that really helped me, independence is not the final form of what we're aspiring to. It's interdependence. And that is to say, I will take care of me to be in service to you if you promise to take care of you to be in service to me. And it's that final form that those who have avoidant attachment, they don't get to see or experience. Because you're a full, whole human being. Like, take care of you. I get that. And I'm here for your well-being. Because I'm going to take care of me. I'm going to put my mask on, again, to use another metaphor, so that I could be in service, because that's why other people matter. We're stronger together. That's what communities are all about. But those who avoid those relationships, do they reach fulfillment? I guess in their own understanding, but there's another level of fulfillment yet to be reached when you understand what relationships are.
Yeah. And so if you're in your own life and there's a lot of exterior metrics of success, but you still feel like an island, you don't feel connected with people. I love how you put the interconnected side of it. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that that's a better way to rebrand it, right? We, on the one hand, want people to be able to take care of themselves, but really we want people to be able to be in community and take care of each other. Everything that we know about survival has to do in the context of community, right? If you could take one thing with you into the wilderness, that would be like a helpful thing. It would probably best be another person, because if you don't have skills, they might have those skills. If you need someone, if you need to sleep, you have someone to watch your back. And all of life is kind of another version of that, that we need each other to feel connected in this world, to feel like life is meaningful. And when we are disconnected from people, when we don't feel that way, it is a hard and it is a sad way to live for sure.
Yeah. It's worth mentioning here, nonviolent communication, because one of the ideas at the core of it is you have to be aware of your needs, you have to communicate your needs, yet nobody is responsible for meeting your needs or fulfilling your needs except for you. And that's how you parse the idea of being needy, yet having needs. So I do have clear needs and I'm responsible for meeting them. And I can make a request to help ask other people to meet them. But when they say no, that's oftentimes when you hear people, when their attachment style flares up. However, being a secure person, when you say no, I say thank you. And I go figure out how I can meet my needs. Again, that's going down another rabbit hole. But I just wanted to make the point of when you don't get what you want, this is where attachment styles flare up, where there is conflict. And it's like there is going to be conflict. But these attachment styles, as you know them, it helps you how to manage them so that we can still have good community.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to say it. If I have an anxious attachment style, then I'm going to always rely on other people to try and fulfill my needs. If I have an avoidant attachment style, then I'm never going to lean on anyone to fulfill my needs, right? Like I'm never going to like be vulnerable with someone, to share my feelings, to let someone know that I'm struggling, to let people know that I need help. Um, and if I have a secure attachment style, then I do feel like I can also self regulate and at the same time be vulnerable and not have to be perfect. But then we have our last attachment style, which is fearful avoidant. Oftentimes it's called anxious avoidant and also disorganized attachment. Can you walk us through what that is?
I'll walk you through. I'll give you in a comment, in a statement. You ever push on the gas and the brake at the same time? And it's one definition of conflict, as an ELA teacher, you'd appreciate this, is wanting of two different things. So when there's an external conflict, one party wants something and another party wants another thing. When there's an internal conflict, it's just you want two things and you're not sure what it is. Here, you want to be close, you want intimacy, but then also you're fearful and you want to be separated. When you want two different things, your forces are going in two separate. That's what this is. It's your gears are spinning. You're not going anywhere. You feel exhausted. You're burnt out. Or rather, that can be a result of it. But it's just not being clear if you want to be close to the person fully or if you're trying to avoid them.
Yeah. And another way to think about it is somebody who has a disorganized attachment style has gone through a whole bunch of stuff. You've had both the parent who was not around sometimes and the parent who was around but told you to figure it out yourself or to not cry or to be seen but not heard, right? Like all of those things. Sometimes this is the parent who at one moment is like really loving and at another moment is physically punishing you, right?
There's also childhood emotional neglect, CEN, by a woman named Janice Webb. And the reason I put it in there is because you could be from an affluent family or a well put together family and have all your physical needs met in a sense. But if you're not emotionally, as I said, seen and soothed, and you don't have that emotional connection, this could, let's say, throw a wrench or a spanner inside your machinery of emotionally connecting to people. So these are not only people with ACEs or like all these other issues piled up. This happens at any socioeconomic level. This is emotional development. So if you don't have that person who could connect with you on the inside in those spaces, there's another book called The Price of Privilege by Madeline Levine. And a lot of those kids, what she was noticing inside her practice, they don't have anybody who's psychologically wise to go into their head, to walk with them through life stressors. So don't think that you've avoided this if you've had all your physical needs met.
Yeah, that's such a really amazing and important point to think about. And for those of you who don't know, ACEs is an acronym for Adverse Childhood Experiences. This describes potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood, from the ages of, 0 being born to 17 years old. And as Marcus points out, while lots of people with disorganized attachment styles have ACEs, you don't have to have them in order to have developed this attachment style. In fact, you could have what looks like a pretty sweet life on paper and still develop a disorganized attachment style. If you go into any of the suburbs of like well-to-do areas, you're going to still find a lot of depressed and anxious kids. And if you go into places that have like a lower socioeconomic profile, or there's more abject poverty, or there's increased racism and discrimination, yeah, you're going to find a lot of anxious and traumatized and depressed kids there too. And it's going to look differently depending on the specific family, depending on the exact circumstances. But like money won't save you here. It is just because a parent has physically provided for all of the things, even things that they never had growing up. And that was one of the things that I heard a lot with parents as teachers, is to say, when I was growing up, I didn't have this, I didn't have this. Now they have all of this. What else do you need, kind of thing? And if the emotional learning isn't there, if that emotional support isn't there, then they're still going to feel like they don't have a secure attachment.
Angela Duckworth says every kid needs at least one psychologically wise adult in their life. And what that looks like is a person who, as I said before, can go into their head, help them make sense of it, help them see their worth, their value, and walk with them through their thoughts. Now, with these attachment styles, we don't trust certain people coming into our heads. I get it. There's no persuasion without identification. And if I can't see how you're like me, then it's hard for you to influence me. That's just human development. But if we can find the common ground, and if we build trust over time, the kid will let you inside their head, and then you can walk with them to help process their thoughts.
And it's awesome if you're able to meet them as kids when this is the case, right? And this is a lot of the work that you're doing, is you're kind of reaching out to them at that stage where maybe they're seeing problems within school, behavior problems. And in school, oh my God, they use all kinds of terms to be able to tell a student that they have a learning disability or whatever. We have things like object defiance disorder, or like we have all of these different terms that we use and are put on people's individualized education plans, or IEPs. Oftentimes they're put into special education because of this thing, because of these underlying attachments that have not been fulfilled, that they haven't learned, that their brain hasn't developed, and in turn causes them to not be able to be successful in the social community of school or whatever place that they're in, or in the family. So how do you work with families? How do you work with these young people to identify these problem areas and then to grow?
So anybody listening now, right now, I want to recommend the book, The Breakthrough Years by Ellen Galansky. And the reason I mentioned that book, I'll put it inside a phrase. Once I did bad, heard it forever. Twice I did good, heard it never. I'm sorry, I'm just filled with all these quotes, but where your attention goes, energy flows. Like, one thing that was disheartening when working in an AP program, and that's what I did while I was abroad, right? That was the type of program I worked in. It was very similar to public education in the US.
Advanced placement, right? AP program?
Correct. And they would follow an American system of education. It would always churn me the wrong way. Teachers would always find something to complain about. 1. 2, kids move towards your expectations. We know the Pygmalion effect of the teacher who was told these are low achieving students, these are high achieving students. And sure enough, by the end of the year, that's the way they shifted. The kids were neutral. The thing that was different was the teacher's expectations of them. When you're a teenager, you get from society, you get from all these other different points and views and places, expectations of you. And what compounds this, unfortunately, is social media. We noticed there was an uptick for those people born after 1995. In 2012, we noticed it. Look in the book. I really do love reading. It's called The Anxious Generation. People weren't able to form their identities off the screens, face-to-face with other people. They're forming it in social networks. That is to say, in likes and in challenges and so on. The thing is, when the screen closes, the question is, who are you? And if you don't know who you are, you can't push against the stresses of life. So we have all these things compounded against us. I'm focusing on the solution. That is the work I do. I'm trying to catch them in their preteen years to tell them empowering stories to their identity there so that we can have this foundation of trust when the inevitable stressors of teenage years come. I'll end on this because I know I'm saying a lot, and this is really what I'm passionate about. um, Life is about being misunderstood. What do I mean by that? There's this Emerson quote that says, "To be great is to be misunderstood." And then he lists off all these world leaders. And it was in his poem, Self-Reliance. But it's learning how to trust yourself if you know you're doing the right thing, if you're living into your virtues and values. Now, that's a hard concept to get when you're a kid. When you're living it right, you're doing everything that's right, you don't know what's expected of you. Social media is pulling you this way, peers are pulling you this way. Just all of this stuff is going on. Helping them manage to find out who they are and be okay living into that, to be secure, as we are talking in the context of having healthy, secure attachments. That's the work I want to do. And I want to help parents create that conversation in their homes, because be mindful of the voice with which you speak to children, for in time that becomes a voice with which they speak to themselves. And I want to create that communication channel at the most leveraged point. That is the voice of the parent. In regards to the IEPs, and I understand they were well-meaning and well-intentioned. The thing is, I found when kids would know something is on their IEP, they would look it up and then they would live into it, and that'd be self-fulfilling prophecies. That's why with the work I do, again, I'm not ignoring them. I'm not going to say they're not bad, but I am going to speak to something greater. I'm going to create the context for your greater self, your greater expression to come forth. And there are bumps and bruises along the ways. And I have worked with, troubled kids, but it's when your troubledness is not framing the context of this. My ability to receive what's inside you, or like the interest, the passion to do something else, I'm framing this. I'm the adult in this setting, so I'm setting the tone. And that's the approach that I used in the class and when I was a mentor. And that's what I want to create inside the home.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful way to look at it. And when you think about the root of what education is, like the root word of it, education means to draw out from within. And what it's saying is like, I'm not giving you knowledge, I'm not telling you something new. I'm looking at who you are, and I'm saying that there's already beauty and greatness and strength and survival and creativity within the stuff that you've been doing and how you've been able to interact with this world. And my goal is to help manifest that and to mold it into something that's positive, to be able to make an impact and to be able to be within your community, right? If you think about the ways, every single way that a kid will manifest what we call as a negative behavior or as a maladaptive coping mechanism, it is just a way for them to survive in the world. And when you start looking at these things through the lens of survival, the first thing it allows you to do is to have some compassion, to
Mm-hmm.
have some compassion for where the person is coming from. The manifestation and the things that they're doing might be really ugly. It might be calling people names. It might be hitting people. It might be destroying things. It might be being really rude to their classmates and saying unkind things to you. It might be all of those different things, but the root of it was a need to survive, was a need unfulfilled, was a place in which they did not feel like they could trust or feel safe. And as a return, they had to figure out a way to survive in the world. And when you first look at through compassion, you're able to say, okay, now what do I do? Right. And so maybe that's like the next question. What do you do? How do you have these conversations with parents? How do you have these conversations with kids in a way that allows them to start changing that narrative, that personal narrative that maybe they've come to believe over time?
We are the stories we tell ourselves. One. Two is you speak to the character that they are and you create the context. The person who controls the context controls the narrative, because there's no meaning without context. That might mean physical environment. Yeah. That means the environment inside their head, the story that they're telling themselves about themselves, the story that the trustworthy present parents inside their lives are telling them, or the adults in their lives. What is the first thing you do to combat that? First thing, the only thing you can do is really control who you are and what you do. And like I love what you said. Lead with compassion and then be curious, because all behavior comes from a place to meet a need. And if a person is not meeting an expectation, it's one of three things. Either they don't have the skills, they don't feel supported, or it's not important to them. If it's not important to them, then there's something else that's important to them. In the framework that I have, the show up framework, one, it starts with strong identity. Two is hold space for collaboration and critical thinking. And that is autonomy supportive parenting, or autonomy supportive adulting, let's say. It's helping the person towards what they want, their goals and their expressions, and then supporting them in as much as it's in alignment with the broader goals. To your question, what do you do? It's a big question to answer. Regulate yourself first. Put your own oxygen mask on first. I know that sounds very general, but get your stuff together. Then be curious about them, meet them, and meet the true them. Meet them at their core and start speaking to, again, where your attention goes, your energy flows. So start speaking to that greater part in them and give them evidence and examples to start believing it. That's how beliefs are changed. When we're writing an essay, you believe something. The truth is you're finding evidence for that in life. And while you don't have to hold my belief, I'm going to tell you why I believe what I believe by giving you evidence and examples as to why I believe what I believe. And I believe you're dope. So I'm going to find evidence and examples in your life as we go through activities, as we do work, as we're together, as to why I see beauty in you. I wouldn't use beauty with a kid, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's so much to be said. Just summarizing some of the stuff that you're talking about is one, taking care of your own self first and making sure that you are exemplifying the behavior in which you hope to manifest within this kid. Two is understanding that if they're not meeting expectations, it comes down to skills, support, or importance or relevance to them. And I think about this all the time because when I left the classroom, I got into the mental health space. And now I look in hindsight at a lot of the stuff that I did, and I wish I could do things differently, right? There's so many times in which I wish I would have acted differently in the classroom. And I'm sure parents probably feel the same way, as the more you learn, the better you do. And it only changes when we know better, right? But like one of the really basic things is understanding that there are mirror neurons within a kid's developing brain. And what that means is that they are learning how to mirror behavior around them. They do this with dance moves, they do this with faces, but they also do this with self-regulation. And they also do this with expressing kindness. They also do this in communicating their needs. And one thing that you can show and do as a parent every single day, even if you do not get any further in the curriculum, or if you're late to this appointment, is you can show a kid how to be calm and self-regulate, how to communicate your needs, and how to be kind. And if you can teach them how to do those three things over and over and over again, then you provide a space where a kid feels safe, and then learning happens. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we know that self-actualization is at the very top, but at the bottom, along with food and water and shelter, is safety. And if a kid does not feel safe, you cannot grow physically and you cannot grow mentally. And so everything comes down to establishing that rapport and that feeling of safety. And by the way, folks, it's not going to happen overnight. It comes through repeated exposure over and over and over again. It is not like a one-time get to know you worksheet at the beginning of the year. It is not having a secret handshake with a kid. It is through repeated exposures, just like a secure attachment takes place over years and years and years. And an anxious avoidant attachment takes place because or disorganized is when you don't have that, as you said, that repetition of secure attachment. That's so important. There's one other thing before I forget. I want to make sure that we talk about this, but another really helpful tool that I wish I had unpacked more when I was a teacher was the use of motivational interviewing, which is a really interesting way to be able to help anybody, but also kids, be able to determine their goals and to make a change. But it also positions you with a really simple framework of asking open-ended questions, affirming, which is to what you were saying, the story, the narrative within them, the good positive words that they have to say about themselves, even if they're hidden in like the mix of a bunch of other negative things, the reflection so that they see that they're understood and heard, and the summarizing to be able to help organize their thoughts and to let them know what to do next. So I'll link some stuff on motivational interviewing, but that's another really powerful thing for kids. Anything else you want to say? What do you want parents to know?
Two things. That motivational inquiry or interviewing, as you said, in my approach to parenting, bringing forth the best in kids, you have to trust their wisdom. And what motivational inquiry does helps them tell themselves as to why this is important and why they should go for it. And you're just, again, the guide on the side saying, okay, yeah, all right, cool, and let's get it. And that's when you align yourself with them and be like, yeah, let your awesomeness fly. The second thing is you're going to fall short. You're going to fall short of your expectation. And that is a feature, not a bug of human development. Everything that grows, eventually grows, must first break. When you fall short, you look at yourself and say, is this the type of person I want to be? If it's not, you make it right. And then you have that knowledge going forward. And you grow stronger in the broken places. So when you fall short of your expectations, that is a feature, not a bug.
It's a part of the growth process. So for our listeners or watchers who are thinking, okay, I'm on the next step, I feel like there's some stuff I could use to learn more and to grow in this. Where can they go to learn more about you and all the awesome, amazing work that you're doing?
MarcusHiggs.com. I'm having some workshops over the summer that will be posted by the time this is posted at workshops.marcushiggs.com or on LinkedIn. That's where I'll be. That's where you can find me.
So you'll find all of those linked up in the description box in the show notes below. Listen, y'all, this whole family attachment styles thing, it is real, but it is also much more common than you think. And with the help of folks like Marcus and reframing the way that we understand our development and the way that we talk to ourselves and talk to teens, it's also treatable. We will see you on the next episode. This episode of Treatable was edited by Daniel Lopez. The intro and explanatory sections of the episode were written by Alexandra Kruger. The theme song was created by Sebastian Gonzalez, and the cover art for this episode is created by Joel Daniel. If you got any value from this episode, it would personally mean the world to me if you would leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It helps to spread mental health awareness to more folks, and I read each and every comment that people leave. So tell us what you appreciate about the podcast, and you just might hear us feature it on the next episode. All of my love, and we'll see you on the next one.